wall. You are to hell with the cap. Let's get the guys in here. Let's go full Rams in 2021. Get the thing done. Get a ring. The Titans are firmly in. They're in phase. Welcome in to the Hot Read podcast for Monday, March the 25th. I'm your host, Easton Freeze, director of published content here at BroadwaySportsMedia.com. We're also brought to you by the 440 Podcast Network. You can follow me on social media at Easton Freeze. I'm joined on a Sunday afternoon by producer JT, as always. You can follow on social media at JT_Runke. JT, so much going on late here in March. We got the draft right around the corner. We've got March Madness coming up. How are you, my friend?
March Madness coming up. We are in the middle of the madness.
A championship coming up. Yes. We are in the middle of the madness. Yes, absolutely.
My bracket's busted, so we don't have to talk too much about that. I mean, I tried. It's the saying, if you put too much effort into it, the worse you'll do, and that's exactly what I did this year.
It's grandmas who are picking the pretty colors and funny team names that end up winning the bracket pool, right? That's how it goes. That's the fun of it. If you're Jay Billis, you're going to come in last in your family bracket pool. That's how it goes.
We're officially a month away from the draft, which is exciting. So back to doing Sunday night shows on our 3 episodes a week because
Sunday shows. I like it.
It's the draft season is upon us. And then, Titans broke some news over the weekend, and that's all we have to talk about, really. Just
right. Titans broke some news over the weekend.
A Titan.
Yeah, Titans broke some news over the weekend, which is going to, of course, be the crux of today's episode. I broke some news in my personal life today. People that know me have known this for a long time, but publicly announced that I am very excited. I'm going to be a dad. My wife and I are having our first child at the end of July. It's such a weird due date because, you want to make these like announcement social media pictures, and it's like new baby coming in July 2024. You want to you want to give the time frame, but it's at the very end of the month. So we don't know whether to say July or August because it's not up to us when that happens, right? It could easily be either. So it's like a movie. We're saying like late summer 2024. Like, I don't know how else to address that. But we are super stoked. Thank you, Jake. Appreciate you with the congratulations in the comments. Gotten a lot of really kind words from folks on Twitter and on Instagram. And so we are super stoked. It's girl dad season, JT. So the next Caitlin Clark, I'm going to be manifesting that, going to be grooming that from day one.
Project Caitlin Clark is starting today. Is
right. If you've ever seen me in real life, you know that the genes are there. Absolutely 100% for an elite D1.
Are you making the Mrs. Freeze watch Caitlin Clark videos and watch tape right now?
Already scouting. Okay. Yes, 100%. It's got to be a team effort.
Because that's osmosis, right? If she watches it, it's just going to go right. It's going to go right.
I've got I've got a pair of headphones on her stomach already playing like I need that. I need the culture ingrained on her brain. And so that's where we're at right now. But super excited. So that's very cool. And thanks for all the well wishes from folks that have had some nice things to say. Let's get back to the breaking news with the Titans, though. And like I said, JT, I have missed these Sunday shows. It's a different vibe doing a show on the weekend. It's nice because I feel like, as opposed to like a Thursday afternoon show where I see all these other shows during the day and it's like, they're talking about the thing I wanted to talk to, or the news is breaking. We're not the first to it. It's like, we get to be the first in the market to kind of open up the week, drop our show as early as humanly possible, beat all the radio shows and podcasts tomorrow. And they're all great, but we're first when we're on Sunday. And so I appreciate that. And we're going to be the first, besides the folks that really went above and beyond on Friday night at 10 p.m. and did an emergency reaction show. I know here on the 440 Podcast Network, we had one of those, the Justin and Justin show. They did a short pod on that on Friday night, which more power to you. I texted you about it, and we were both like, that's not happening. No, we're not doing that. So here we are. This is as soon as we can do it. The Titans dropped the news that they were signing L'Jarius Sneed at the most dumpy time of the entire week. 10 p.m. on a Friday evening. Rand Carthon and the GM, the front office over there at St. Thomas Sports Park, burning the midnight oil, it seems. And they dropped at 10 p.m. that the Chiefs were finalizing a deal to send franchise cornerback L'Jarius Sneed to the Titans. Per league sources, Chiefs are expected to receive a 2025 third round pick, in addition to a 2024 7th round pick swap, while Sneed, of course, will be signing a new contract with Tennessee. The trade is pending a physical for L'Jarius Sneed. And so the Titans are giving away, not this upcoming, not a month from now, but a year and a month from now, the 2025 third round pick that they have, because of course they don't have a third this year. And they are swapping 2024 seventh round picks. So they'll be giving up 252. We know that for a fact. One of their 3 seventh round picks this year, trading it for a pick somewhere after 252. The Chiefs will be moving up.
I believe 252.
Do we know the number now?
I believe 252 is the Chiefs pick, and
that
that they will be getting.
Okay.
They'll be getting one of, I think.
You wrote this note, and I totally butchered it. So yes,
219,
100%.
221, or 240.
So we know the Titans received 252 because that's all the Chiefs have, right? That's their only seven.
That's the only one they have in the 7th round. So that was, by process of elimination, was pretty easy to figure that one out.
We don't know. I haven't the Titans
seen,
have so many.
Yeah. I have not seen it reported anywhere which one they'll be swapping. In the grand scheme of things, does it really matter? No. Not really when you get L'Jarius Sneed, right? But it is important to note that they will have one of the last picks in the draft now.
Yeah, 100%. We're going to get as much of this reporting out of the way as possible, get all of the groundwork out there and our thoughts on the timeline of events, and then we'll give some analysis on the back half of the show. Diana Rossini came in on Friday night. Excuse me, this was Saturday morning, saying that the Titans and the Chiefs almost had the trade for L'Jarius Sneed done on Tuesday, March 12th, which was like 12 days ago now. Both sides worked on trade compensation, and it was almost complete by that afternoon. The Titans kept working on it, and the Chiefs let it play out while also being fine with keeping Sneed if that was how those things were going to work themselves out. And so we heard from Diana Rossini on her Athletic podcast network show at some point last week about how she had the tweet ready to go on that Tuesday that she thought the Titans deal was going to get done. And then it didn't. Can I just say in general, JT, the reporting on this entire saga up until we actually knew what happened was one of the most frenetic, all over the place, contradictory messes from a local to national level that I've seen in a long time with offseason, a star moving in the offseason like this. You heard so many things, and as early as, or I guess as recent as an hour before the actual news came out about the Titans trade for him, there were entire articles put out by major publications about like, well, this is what I've heard. And it's, they're thinking starting with the second round pick and compensation in 2024. And the holdup is actually the Chiefs and not the L'Jarius Sneed. You heard some very strong things come out of Indianapolis last week or the week before about how the Colts were very, very close to signing Sneed. And then some other things from Indianapolis saying, don't know what this other person's talking about. The Colts aren't in at all on L'Jarius Sneed. It was a mess. The Titans reportedly were out, according to our buddy PK, at one point, and then they were back in. Nobody knew what was going on. And I'd gotten to the point on Friday, I was thinking about it before this happened. Like, mentally, I'm hitting mute on this entire thread of rumors until I get an actual hard evidence thing, like the trade actually happening was a nice way to put that to rest. And so we also got a little bit of reporting from Buck Rising saying that the Titans head coach, Brian Callahan, was a massive proponent of L'Jarius Sneed in the building, had a tremendous amount of respect for the player. GM and coaching staff were consistent in their pursuit. The Titans get their guy. For Titans fans, not only is adding L'Jarius Sneed, adding Calvin Ridley, they're two big major blockbuster deals in this free agency cycle, one on each side of the ball. Not only does adding those guys make the football team a lot better, and that's really sweet, but it's made even sweeter by the fact that it royally pisses off two division opponents in the Jaguars, who messed around and lost their wide receiver one in Calvin Ridley, and then the Colts, who a lot of fans really hoping at one point, really thinking they were going to land L'Jarius Sneed. They're a team that you could argue is a big cornerback addition away from being pretty set across the board, especially on defense at the very least. And so I know a lot of fans very upset with Chris Ballard, who approaches free agency to the beat of his own drum. I'd say each offseason he does things a little bit differently. And so I know a lot of Colts fans. We have got some Colts fans friends that were texting us just irate when this news came down and not sure exactly what had happened here. So the Titans and Titans fans, more importantly, getting a good laugh out of this, I think. In general, let's start with the trade, and then we can get to the contract the Titans gave him. JT, the trade was an absolute bargain. And I think it surprised everybody when it came out. We'd heard rumors amongst the mess of, we heard a little bit of everything, but in that everything we did hear, it actually might just be a 3rd round pick or something even later, a swap in this year's draft, or maybe even future compensation, future years. We don't know. And so that's what ends up happening here. The Titans having to give away a future 3rd and a this year 7th round pick swap, total bargain. And the question is, like, why? What's the deal? There's a couple of things that went into this, right? First of all, there is an injury concern, which we're going to talk about here in just a second. The knees are a thing here with L'Jarius Sneed. And so was it enough to deter the Titans from pursuing him at this number? No, it was not. Is it something that is on the Titans and the Chiefs and everybody in the league who potentially pursued L'Jarius Sneed's radar? 100% it is. And so that is something. But I think more important to what ultimately happened in terms of compensation here is, one, draft pedigree. It follows you no matter what. It sticks to guys, and it's underrated all the time just how much where you were drafted sticks in the minds of NFL teams and NFL front offices, for right or for wrong, and oftentimes for wrong, right? Like, there is a reason that Mitch Trubisky is getting a 1-year, $4 million deal or whatever he got in Buffalo this year, when last year he put on tape a good sample size of vet minimum play. Like, that's just the reality of it. I'm not a hater on Mitch Trubisky, but there's a reason why he's getting that contract. It's because he's a top 10 first round pick in the NFL draft. Even though that was years and years ago, that still matters to folks. And it's reflected in trades and in contracts. And so when the Chiefs find L'Jarius Sneed, I believe is a 4th round pick when they drafted him, that still matters to front offices. And as much as fans want to dismiss it, and I think for good reason, because it's silly, once you're in the league, no one should care about where you were drafted. That sunk cost is not so much a fallacy for front offices when it comes to, well, we found him in the 4th round. They found him in the 4th round, so we're not going to give him 2nd round compensation. That's crazy. He's a 4th rounder, even though he plays like a top 10 pick in the league. The other thing is, the Chiefs pretty clearly wanted this cap space now, I think, JT, because they could have hung on to L'Jarius Sneed and they could have let him play out on his contract. And, it would not have hurt them financially, really, at all. We're going to discuss the details of that a little bit later, because that's a fallacy that you heard thrown around a lot. Well, the Chiefs were in a bind. No, they absolutely were not. And we'll disprove that in a minute. They also could have gone with the comp pick route. They could have, or excuse me, this would have resulted in the comp pick route if they had kept him on the team, right? Keep him on the team. You lose him in free agency a year from now, because of course this is a trade. This is not a free agency transaction. So you lose him in free agency after his 5th year option, or excuse me, his franchise tag runs out, right? And you get a comp pick in return. The math on that was going to be roughly a late 3rd round pick in return for the Chiefs. They're essentially gambling that they are moving up 20, 25 spots in the 3rd round, thinking the Titans' 2025 3rd round pick may very well be a mid to early 3rd round pick if the Titans aren't a juggernaut this year. And they are certainly a rebuilding team, so that's not a crazy thing to gamble on. And so you may be moving up in the draft in that way. You can also beat the comp pick system in the sense that if you let him go in free agency, you get that 3rd round worth of value back on your comp pick value sheet, the spreadsheet. The value is there, but it is immediately offset by any and all trades, or excuse me, signings you bring in, right? You go out and you get guys in free agency next year when L'Jarius Sneed walks, and you don't still get that 3rd round pick and the guys you bring in. It is a net, it's a net sum situation when it comes to comp picks. And so they won't offset if you can't offset the 3rd if you traded for the 3rd, and you have that in writing, which the Chiefs now do from the Titans. So that's essentially why I think this trade was what it looked like, and why those of us in the media had it wrong, right? I think a lot of folks thinking, how often did we talk on this show and in this media market, JT, about how it kind of starts at 38, doesn't it? That's where the conversation begins. Wasn't even close.
Yeah, I mean, you can also just kind of look at the other player who's was franchise tag and traded, Brian Burns. He didn't get near the capital that he once was almost traded for.
What was it, a 3rd and a 5th for him?
It was, I think, I think it's a 2nd and a 4th, actually.
I'll double check that. It was not a 1st, I'll tell you that much.
It was not a 1st pick when the whole story around him was that Brian Burns could have been traded away for 2 firsts and a 2nd, like almost a year ago now.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a big thing when you're not only just trading for a player who already has a contract, you're trading for a player and have to give him the contract. I think that's a big thing. And I think you hit the nail on the head of why this made sense for the Chiefs here. One, like you said, they're not in a cap bind, but they could use the money right now to go out and make other moves. Whether it
and I
is
think they
locking
intend
some
to, pretty
guys
clearly, right?
up.
I think they want
Yep.
that. They want that space right now.
Whether it's locking up guys long term now so that they can have that money, and kind of just keep the saga going that the Chiefs are kind of looking for right now with that kind of dynasty that they have. And two, like you said,
Burns
there
was
is
a second and a fifth, by the way.
a second and a
Split
fifth.
the difference.
But two, the Chiefs are definitely gambling on the Titans, that third round pick next year being in the top 10 of the third round, where it basically could be seen as a later second round pick. And you kind
They
of
don't
see
think
the
they're
value
getting the
there.
84th pick in return.
Correct.
Right. They think that they're getting the 67th pick in return.
Yes.
Yeah. 100%.
And they may be right in that. Like, as much as good as L'Jarius Sneed is, we talked all offseason, how much does he's not going to move the needle for this team, right? This is still a very much rebuilding team with a quarterback who has question marks around him. So it's not like this is guaranteed that the Titans here are going to have a late round third. So I think that's what they're betting on.
Yep, absolutely. And we're going to talk the back half of the show all about what this means for the Titans in 2024. And I think it means a lot, not just this move, but what the Titans' full free agency cycle, because it's not to say that they are done now. They are not done. They still have more bodies they need on the team. But in terms of big moves, that was the one that was out there. T. Higgins, little tag and trade action. Not for the Titans, But I'd imagine we've seen two big tag and trades now in L'Jarius Sneed and before him Brian Burns. I'd imagine T. Higgins is hoping me third. Like, let's keep this train rolling. I don't think the Titans are going to be in the market for any more big signings. And so we have a general idea as to what their free agency haul looks like. And we'll discuss all of that in a minute. Before we do, if you're with us live today, we appreciate you joining us on a Sunday in the midst of March Madness action going on. I believe there's basketball being played right this minute. Who's James Madison getting killed by Duke? We appreciate you, James Madison, for making this show more palatable. You're not missing anything, guys. If you're here with us live, Duke is killing them. And Clemson Baylor just started, so you can watch the back half of the game once you're done here. That's great timing on our part. Thank you to the NCAA.
And we're not getting in the middle of the Alabama game either. So win-win. Perfect scheduling.
In SEC country, Can you imagine if we tried to do a show last night right in the middle of the Tennessee-Texas game? Not even you and I would probably be here.
Yep.
So we appreciate you being here with us live. If you're watching on Twitter or on Facebook, we appreciate you being there, but we would appreciate it even more if you'd move on over to Broadway Sports Media's YouTube page. That's Broadway Sports Media on YouTube. Find this live stream there. And in the comment section of that live stream, that's where you can be a part of today's conversation. So many kind words from folks in the comments already. Appreciate you, Jake and Jill and Jacob and DJ and Maverick and Derek and Kenneth and Jacob and AJ for the kind words on my child, which somebody's car alarm is going off. For the child that I'm having, which I hate this portion of being a dad, because it's like, we're pregnant, but I'm not doing anything. I'm just chilling. She's the one that's like, sick sometimes and has sore feet and is like doing the hard work. And so, man, men are just freeloaders during this portion. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't enjoying it a little bit. So thank you. I'll pass on the kind words to my wife who's doing the hard work. How about that? Make sure you're sharing today's show if you can. We would appreciate that. That's the one big favor you can do for us. If you could hit like on the YouTube video, that thumbs up button is very helpful to us. And while you're there on YouTube, subscribe if you're not already. We are getting closer and closer, JT, to our goal of 1,000 subscribers on the Broadway Sports Media YouTube page, and we can use y'all's help. Every subscription counts. It's very easy. It's free to you, and so we'd appreciate it. If you're not subscribed already, hit subscribe for us. And while you're at it on Twitter, hit retweet, hit like, send the link to a buddy, all those things. Just share the show. We appreciate when you do that for us, and we would love to get as many live eyeballs on today's show as humanly possible on a Sunday. So thank you for doing that. Let's dive into the contract, JT, and we've got the details of it here. Jordan Schultz was the first out with that on Friday evening, saying the Titans' terms with L'Jarius Sneed on the surface. Again, huge caveat. We need the details. They'll probably come out in the next day or two or three. But for now, what we know is that it is $19 million APY over 4 years, $55 million guaranteed. So I didn't even write down what's the actual full term of the contract. 19 over 4, quick math. That is
Yes,
80,
I believe it's 76. I believe
76. Yeah, there we
is
go.
the fully guaranteed, or not guaranteed, but that is the
Full
full
term
AAV.
number. Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, 76 million. So 19 million APY over 4 years, 55 in guarantees. Our buddy Zach Lyons over at Football and Other F Words and a football show here on the 440 Podcast Network. He is the cap guru. He is the numbers guy, and he did a good job of breaking this down. So the basic terms of the contract look like this: 8th highest in terms of AAV among cornerbacks in the league right now. 19 million is, once again, not really anywhere near where we thought it was going to be, JT. A lot of this talk when he was unsigned was, well, the Chiefs, the trade with the Chiefs is not the hard part. It is figuring out where you can come to terms with L'Jarius Sneed in his camp, because he wants to reset the market. He wants 21, 22, $23 million APY. The top of the market right now, I believe, is 21 per year to the Packers' Jair Alexander, if I'm not mistaken. And so I was kind of expecting that number to be the floor for where L'Jarius Sneed would come in, and yet he comes in at 8th overall. What I think the bargain here was, or excuse me, the what's the word I'm looking for? The deal that was struck between the two camps is the guaranteed money. $55 million guaranteed if it's fully guaranteed, because these words are intentionally confusing this time of year, folks. When you see guarantee, that doesn't actually necessarily mean guaranteed. If you see somebody say this much money guaranteed at signing, or fully guaranteed at signing, or even just fully guaranteed, even then sometimes you got to be kind of suspect about it. That's actually all guaranteed. But if you just see guaranteed or guaranteed over the lifetime of the contract, the course of the contract, that's not actually guaranteed money, man. If this $55 million number is actually fully guaranteed at signing, then that is number one by a country mile. It's $10.5 million more than the second most guaranteed money to a cornerback in the league. But as Zach put it on Twitter, and I wholeheartedly agree, I give it like a 1% chance that number is actually $55 million fully guaranteed. Zach, I don't know how he came to this number, but he's very good with these contracts. I trust him wholeheartedly on the math here. He says that it sounds like it'll be like in the $43 to $45 million range based on the guesstimations he's done with this contract, and kind of trying to fill in the blanks that we don't have yet with the details of this contract. So that will probably be like the 2024 base and the 2025 base plus a signing bonus. That's the fully guaranteed number. And so it will probably reset the market in terms of guarantees. Again, I think that's the bargain that was struck here between the two camps, and he will be making north of 44.5 million guaranteed fully, which is the current number for the highest in the league for a cornerback. But is it 55? I seriously doubt it. And
we
so
had one today. Yeah, we had one earlier today where it was the Jerry Jeudy number, I think, was off fully guaranteed by like 10 million or so as well. I'm right. Just ballparking that, but yeah, I mean that's probably right around the ballpark.
We had Chase Young earlier this week, right? It came out $13 million 1 year fully guaranteed, and then it turns out actually it's like $7 or $6 million with a crazy amount of game day bonuses that aren't actually guaranteed.
Only the Saints could pull something off like that.
The very Saints move. Yep. Yeah, 100%. And so yeah, the 55 number is probably adding in some 2026 and 2027 roster bonuses that activate on that 5th day of the respective league year to get it up to 55 million, which if he's not on the roster by then, 3-4 years down the road, then those numbers never actually reach his checkbook. So let's talk about the Chiefs side of this real quick, JT, before we get into what this means for the Titans. And if we have any comments in the comment section that I need to address, just cut me off and bring those up. But the Chiefs, why do they do this, right? Were they in a financial bind over this? I think the hard and fast answer is obviously no. And here's why. You saw a number of national media folks saying, well, the Chiefs love L'Jarius Sneed. Great guy, great player. But they couldn't make the numbers work. They were in a financial bind over this. They had to make a sacrifice somewhere. That is national folks. Some of them very much 100%, I think, bold-faced, just being mouthpieces for the Chiefs. I'm not going to say who is and who isn't. But there are some folks that I think are saying that, and they're just parroting what they've heard, accidentally being mouthpieces because they don't understand the reality of the situation. And so we turn back to the cap guru and Zach again, our numbers guy. I texted him because I said the Chiefs were not in a financial bind. I know this for a fact. You look at the actual numbers, the contracts they have coming up, you do the math. They could have afforded L'Jarius Sneed and Chris Jones, who they signed earlier this offseason, and the guys they have coming up that they listed as like, well, we've got to sign them in the coming years, and you can't sign everybody. No, you could have signed everybody if you wanted to. As I said, Zach, can you put this together in a concise way for us to share with folks that I can retweet? Like I need a way to show to people without actually just doing the math and being like, well, this guy will be this much, and this guy will be this much, and this is how it affects this year's books, blah, blah, blah. And so he did a great job. Here's what he said. The idea the Chiefs had no financial options to keep Sneed is not founded in realism. True. This is more of a cash issue than a cap issue. And this is a big deal that I think folks are finally starting to realize in the past year or two. Cash versus cap, those are two separate things, and they are limiting in different ways. For the most part, I think it's actually true that in today's NFL, teams that are limited by their cap space are actually limited by their cash poor or cash cheap or a combination of the two ownership. The cash limitations, what they're willing to actually fork over in cold, hard cash now is more limiting than the cap. Teams that have cash aplenty and or are willing to spend that cash willingly, the cap is not unreal. The cap is not fake. It's not a hoax. It is very much real, but it's more of a roadblock than it is a hard limiter to you. You can easily manipulate a very malleable system in the cap if you're willing to put forth the cash, and you got to kick that can down the road. But if you have the cash to do it, you can do it. The Chiefs have $7.6 million in cap space, including Sneed right now. After their draft class, if they had kept Sneed, that is. After the draft class, it would have been about $4.9 million in space. They have 4 players they could have extended to find up to $29 million in cap space in Sneed, Humphrey, Amenahu, and Reed. The Chiefs could have let Sneed play on the tag, and it would have been worth, I think really this is a subjective take from Zach, but I agree with it. It would have been worth it for him to play on that tag and for their chances at a three-peat to be increased by having such a good player on your roster. Again, it's not a cap issue as much as it appears on its face to be a cash issue. And so here's my take on this, JT. All of those facts lead me to this conclusion. I think the Chiefs are making a pretty arrogant move here. And I'm not one to criticize. I am one to dislike the Chiefs and hope that they don't continue their reign of dominance and terror. But I am not one to criticize a very good organization that I think makes very good decisions for the most part. But in this instance, I think that they are making a wrong-headed one and an arrogant one. And here's why. A big part of the reason why they decided to move on from Sneed is that they've got guys in the wings that are ready to step into that role. And that part is fair. That part is true. They have, over the past couple of seasons in the Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes era, become very, very talented at developing young, late day 2, early day 3, flyer talents from the draft into starting cornerbacks. They got a really good cornerbacks coach, good cornerbacks and secondaries group over there that does a good job of turning guys into the best that they can be. And they're leaning too heavily on that in what is, I think, pretty clearly a very conservative decision here. It is basically them making a calculated risk with this move, letting Sneed go and saying, listen, we've got a quarterback that we trust wholeheartedly to bail us out more often than not. We've got a coaching staff that we think can continue to develop guys that are cheap to us, that we find late in the draft, into guys that can be more than adequate starters on our team because we've done it before. We'll do it again. And I think that is all fine and good until you look at the reality of the situation when it comes to dynasties. And when you look at the greatest dynasty in the history of football, the New England Patriots, I think you realize that even when you are a dynasty and you are winning back-to-back Super Bowls, you are winning 3 in 6 years, right? They come in waves. It's not the Chiefs dynasty lasted 2 decades, you and I's entire life, essentially, JT. And yet it wasn't sustained. There was like a 10-year gap in between winning Super Bowls, right? There were 2, maybe arguably 3 separate periods in which they were dynastic to the point of pure and utter dominance, and there was just nothing you can do. And the Chiefs absolutely, in the past 2 years, because they've won the Super Bowl 2 years in a row, but really the past 4 or 5 years, have been in that first window for themselves. And they're clearly trying to kick that can down the road and say, we're going to stay conservative. We're just going to keep doing what we're doing, not make any dramatic moves to try, overreacting to little issues here or there. Clearly, ultimately, we've proven that we can figure it out on the fly. We're going to be okay. And I just don't think that is how it works in the NFL. Even when you are the best of the best, I think they need to be more, and maybe I'll be proven wrong by this. Maybe they'll be the first to ever do it. But I think that they need to be more, we win now, even though we're the best and we think our quarterback, as long as he's on the roster, keeps our window open. We go all in on a three-peat now. We keep guys like Sneed in the building. We overpay. We kick the can with the cap down the road a little bit if we have to, because odds are we will hit a dry spell and we'll have to reload a little bit. We have to retool a little bit. Even though we have the quarterback cornerstone there, it's not going to matter. We're not going to win or be in the AFC Championship game or be in the Super Bowl every single year over and over for decades on end, which is ultimately their end goal. So what's your thoughts on that? I think this was a little bit of an arrogant move. I think it's a move that they may come to regret. Is that wishful thinking as somebody that wants the Chiefs not to succeed?
I mean, it may be a little bit. I do agree that it's tough because as Chef Ram puts right here, Chiefs kind of did the same thing with Tyreek, and that was them betting on themselves as well. But I think that's where you look at two different sides of the ball. One directly impacts your quarterback who just like can't be stopped, and then you have the other side of the ball here, which has had flaws in the past, especially, I mean, the year before where they played the Eagles in the Super Bowl. It certainly wasn't the same defense that they had this past season against the 49ers. And so I think you may be looking at a team who may be trying to bet on themselves, and maybe the odds are not as much in their favor as they themselves think. But at the same time, I do understand why they would want to make. Now, this may all change in a week or two if they go out and get a T. Higgins or do something like that and make that move. But for right now, it does look like they are trying to bet on themselves and the way they bring up players. And I think that's something that it's a gamble, right? And I think you hit the nail on the head that it may be a poor one.
And I understand where Chef Rand is coming from here, right? I get the idea that, well, they did it with Tyreek, like you kind of alluded to. I'd point out that they moved on from Tyreek, but they still had a 1A receiver in Travis Kelce on their team. And then last year, you saw the lack of a guy like Hill on the team rear its ugly head in a big way. And really, you go back and you look at the actual games and you look at the numbers, and that defense that they had last year is what carried them more than anything else through to the Super Bowl. And I think it was the most important single element in them getting done what they did last year. And so I just think, you go back and forth and you lean on one side of the ball, you lean on the other. Eventually, you're going to have to go in, or you're not going to be able to sustain the level of breakneck success that they have so far. But we will see. We will see. Let's talk about the injury concerns with L'Jarius Sneed. And again, if you're with us live, we appreciate you being here. Make sure you're subscribed to Broadway Sports Media's YouTube page. Make sure you're following us on social media at Hot Read Pod. We appreciate you tuning in on a Sunday. The Titans signed L'Jarius Sneed, and with him comes some injury concerns. Those knees, his knee, rather. I believe it's one knee in particular. Maybe both knees. I'm not sure. It's at least one of them. Our buddy Zach Lyons, again, I've given way too much love to Zach today, but he's been on his grind this weekend. He did some deep diving on what the former Chiefs cornerback actually did and did not do in practice last year, considering his significant knee issue. The Chiefs had 63 practices in total, and it's hilarious that he went through and charted all of these, but more power to you. Thank you for doing this. 63 practices from week 1 to the Super Bowl last year. The Chiefs had 43 of them. L'Jarius Sneed was a full participant, so nearly 70%. 14 of them, he was limited, so 22%. And then 6 of them, roughly 10% of those practices, he was a did not participate designation. Now, all 6 of those DNPs came in week 17 and 18. In week 17, he played 98% of the snaps. And then week 18, he rested and didn't play. 17 games of 100% snaps were played for him on the year. 4 of them, all 4 playoff games, were in the playoffs. And so the other 3 were 82%, 94%, and 98%. The point being here, all these numbers just point to the idea that, it wasn't an issue for him last year with the Chiefs. The knee, it was something that he was dealing with and working throughout the year, but it was not something that kept him from being on the field an unbelievable amount and kept him from being on the field at the most important time of the year at the end when they needed him most in the playoffs. He was still there at the end of the game in Baltimore, punching that ball out from blanking. Help me out here. Zay Jones, not Flowers, not Jones. Zay Flowers, yes, Zay Flowers, and essentially winning the Chiefs that game. So I really don't think that the knee issue is that big a deal on the surface. Now, I'm not a doctor, and I'm not there for his checkup. I'm not there for his physical. Titans doctors need to take it seriously. If there's a major issue that is being withheld from you here, point it out. You don't want a guy brought in with bad knees, as Brian says in the comments. Old bad kneed Sneed. That's not something you want on your team. But I think back to the last guy that had vague knee issues with Tennessee Titans and AJ Brown, and a part of the reason why I think they shipped him off in the first place was they just did not trust those knees at that number. And he has since had no issues with those knees that have kept him from missing, or they've kept him from playing significant time in Philadelphia. It's not been a thing that they regret in any way, shape, and form. I don't think that they want to try to make the same mistake here. You swing big. If ultimately the injury is a thing and you didn't see it coming, them's the breaks sometimes, right? The injuries are going to happen in the NFL, and there's just nothing you can do about it. So go get good players while they're still good.
Yeah, I totally agree there. A couple of other comments here in the chat here. Timmy Sama saying this team has a chance at the playoffs. Depends on Will. That'll be a big talking point the rest of the offseason here.
Yeah, or the rest of the show. We'll talk about that.
We'll talk about that. And then Kenneth also saying, I'm officially concerned we are in the offseason champs territory. Not a great history of those working out. That is definitely
I understand
something.
that concern 100%.
And then also a little bit more technical question that we're about to get into as well. Alex says, with the Sneed and Cheeto signings, do we envision McCreary being only in the nickel? And will they play nickel enough where he is on the field most of the game? I think those are all really interesting questions that we will get to here.
Yeah, Alex, a very good question. Give us like 10 minutes. We will get to that. But the short answer is yes and yes. But we'll dive into that some more in just a minute. But let's start with what this means for 2024 for the Titans. And I'm going to be a little bit of a Debbie Downer first, but then we'll get to the exciting stuff, I promise. This is still, despite the signing of Calvin Ridley, despite the signing of L'Jarius Sneed, it is still the year before the year for the Titans at best. And let me explain what I mean in that. This is not a on-field success take as much as it is a roster building take. How you are approaching your roster building and your cap management, the phase of team building that you are in, largely historically dictates the ceiling for your success. And so generally speaking, when you are in that phase two, if you consider phase one rock bottom or tearing down or tanking, and then phase two is that rebuilding transition period for a team. Phase three being you're all in, you are balls to the wall, you are to hell with the cap. Let's get the guys in here. Let's go full Rams in 2021, get the thing done, get a ring. The Titans are firmly they're in phase two, right? That's I think inarguable. And so when you're there in that phase, things can happen. You can get lucky or you can way overachieve. And sometimes teams in transition years, in rebuilding years, have a lot of success and they do more than you'd expect. But in general, a team in a transition year typically has a ceiling of like a, wild card berth, a wild card exit kind of deal. When you're all in, your ceiling is a ring, right? And so this is the NFL. And I've said on this show for years now that the beauty of the NFL, one of my favorite things about it is that it's any given Sunday, anything can happen. There are 100% exceptions to these rules. But in general, that's the way that things work. And where the Titans are right now, they are still the year before the year. Yes, they've added some really exciting guys in Chidobe Awuzie and L'Jarius Sneed and Calvin Ridley and Wood Cushenberry and some big names at big important positions of dire need. But they still have some big needs that they're just not going to be able to address, right? Linebacker. I still, a week later after we've had this whole kerfuffle, I still don't know what their plan is as a linebacker, and I don't see what their plan exactly can be besides the draft, which to their credit, as they bring in these other big guys at other positions, it makes drafting a linebacker that could potentially be a factor for you in your starting rotation this year. That makes, that becomes more and more of a tenable potential idea. But still don't know what that plan is. Safety, still, a concern. Edge and defensive line, still very much concerns. Hey, the Titans still don't have a tackle on either side of the offensive line. That's a problem. So they're going to have some holes this year, and there's going to be some growing pains with a brand new coaching staff, a quarterback in his second year, some guys that are studs, but they're new to the system, and there's an element of cohesion they don't have yet. All of those things are what this year is for. And as we said on the show a couple of episodes ago, their primary goal in this season is not to win the ring. It's not to be super competitive in the grand scheme of the NFL. That's a secondary goal for sure. But their primary objective is to find out what you have in Will Levis and know if he is the franchise guy at the end of the year. Set him up for success, build on this year, and if he is the guy, go into next year screaming, humming, train, chugging down the tracks, ready to go all in. Look at some other teams that did this last year. CJ Stroud and the Texans. They were a team that in 2023 were in that transition year, and they well overachieved. Because I had some folks when I tweeted this that it's, I'm not raining on anybody's parade, but it's still the year before the year for the Titans. I had somebody comment. They said the same thing about the Texans. Yes, they did say that last year. And then the Texans won one playoff game. They barely snuck their way into winning a division. And then they got, by the way, a playoff game against Joe Flacco. And then they got crushed by a real contender. That's a very good transition year, but it's a transition year nonetheless. Someone else said, well, the Bengals, the year they went to the Super Bowl. JT, what year of the rebuild were the Bengals on when they went to the Super Bowl?
Number 3.
I think it was number 3. I think it was the third year of the rebuild. The Titans are on year 1. So like those aren't good comparisons. And so I just want to make it clear with this take. I'm not saying, well, the Titans can't win. They're not going to win the division. They sure as heck can't win the Super Bowl. There's a hard ceiling on this team. I'm going to take all the fun out of the year. Spoiler alert, they're not going to get to where you want them to get. I'm anti that all the time. And I think if you listen to our content, that's not where we're at. But in general, I think that your expectations should be tempered to, if this team makes the playoffs as a wild card team, that's a good thing. That's exciting. And that's, I think, reaching the upper ceiling of reasonable expectations for what this team could be in 2024. And that's a fantastic place to be in a transition year, like the Texans were last year, like Jordan Love and the Packers were last year, where they're both coming into this season able to be all in, able to come screaming down the tracks and try to take advantage of their young quarterbacks and their teams with a lot of flexibility. Now, Debbie Downer stuff out of the way. I do feel like I'm at the point with this Titans offseason, JT, and I want your thoughts on this. I'm at the point where I think that their season this year is pretty much exclusively defined by Will Levis's success. And what I mean by that is if he's the guy, they are a playoff caliber team in 2024. No question, without a shadow of a doubt. A month ago, the difference here is being that a month ago, I probably would have told you he could be awesome this year. He could clearly be the guy, be the real deal. And still the Titans could fall well short because they had big issues elsewhere on the roster. But they've made some really big upgrades. Now, 2 qualifying statements to add to that general statement I just gave. 1, this idea that it's up to Will Levis whether their season goes well or not is under the assumption that they find at least 1 franchise tackle and 1 replacement level tackle before camp, which I think they will in the draft, and then with whatever a late round draft pick, a flyer, older tackle free agency, something like that. And then number 2, I would say that if he's the guy, they're a playoff team in the playoffs in 2024. But it's still the AFC, right? So there are going to be, I think, some playoff caliber teams that just don't get in. They get left out in January. So those are the 2 qualifications there. But in general, I think the Titans did a good job of putting out the fires in free agency that they had on their roster. And I think that whether or not this year is a success is really going to be predicated on, is Will Levis the guy? Did he take the jump that he needed to take? Is he somebody that you're looking to build around going forward?
Yeah, it is the grand experiment, the grand Will Levis experiment, because as I've said in the past, they're kind of making the team around him that they want to build this team forward. And if he's not the guy, okay, at least we know we have the foundation around him to put the next guy in and see if that works, right? But it all comes down to him. And that really is with how many force multipliers they have on this team now. You could start with 1 being Bill Callahan, how much of a force multiplier that can be on the offensive line. 2, Calvin Ridley, how much can that be for that receiving room and for Will Levis? And now 3, another force multiplier in L'Jarius Sneed, where now you're no longer having to worry about, can Chidobe Awuzie be that cornerback 1? Can Roger McCreary hold up out there? Now you have L'Jarius Sneed on the roster, which now bumps Chidobe Awuzie into a role I think better fits himself, and then Roger McCreary into that nickel role there in the defense. They're no longer having to punch above their weight with L'Jarius Sneed on the team.
Yeah, I agree. I want to address just a couple of the comments on the Debbie Downer portion of this, because Charlie's saying that he thought that the Titans were rebuilding last year. They thought they sort of were on the fly, and then that came crashing down. You fired your coach and you moved on from like the whole team. So that's where that landed. Keith's saying, I guess you're a realist, but you sound a little bit like a pessimist. I'm sorry it's coming across that way, Keith. I am trying to be a realist. And in general, I think JT can tell you, if anything, my curse is being too optimistic in general. I'm certainly not the pessimist in the group, but I don't know what part. I think if you listen to the rest of what I'm about to say about the Titans and their potential, you'll realize that I'm actually very optimistic about where they are. I think it's just you want to set realistic expectations of, compete for the playoffs, maybe get in the playoffs as a wild card, maybe sneak into the division winner if the Texans fall apart and the Colts fall apart. But that you those are what you're actually expecting, and if those are exceeded, then fantastic. And if they're not, then you're not disappointed, because that's, I think, pretty realistic given their situation. Shane, I think you got your numbers mixed up here, saying Mahomes got a ring in year 2. It was year 3 for him, year 2 as a starter, right? And Patrick Mahomes is Patrick Mahomes. He was also on a team that was very, very, very further along in their team building. I mean, Alex Smith was winning 9-10 games a year with his hands tied behind his back with the Chiefs when Patrick Mahomes arrived. That team was really well put together and well coached. They were further along in their team building. And then Burrow appearance year 2. Burrow, yes, appearance in year 2. But again, it was year 3 of the rebuild of that
Zach
roster.
Taylor's,
and
head coach, when he became the head coach,
right,
and went to the Super Bowl in year 3.
Yeah, 100%. And so just the timeline there matters a lot. Okay, so here's where the optimism comes in. Like I said, I think that this year I'm ready to say that they have put out enough fires to let Will Levis dictate their success, which is where you want to be. And what I think the Titans have done during this free agency that I'm most proud of them for, most pleased that they have done so successfully, is they've done in free agency what good teams do in preparation for the draft, which is eliminating your musts, the things that you must accomplish in the offseason. You want to get out of the way in free agency. A month ago, right, it felt like a must for the Titans was to address offensive line, wide receiver, and cornerback, all pretty highly in the draft, because you need those guys. You need some starters on the roster. That kind of thing handicaps you, right? It keeps you from being able to look at each position, number 7, number 38, number 104, wherever they're at. It keeps you from being able to look at the board as a whole. You have to have your blinders on those specific positions, and you tend to have to reach, have to overdraft a guy if you really feel like you have to get this position at this place in the draft. They don't have to do that anymore. When you add Calvin Ridley and you add L'Jarius Sneed, those 2 moves alone really change the picture. The only must that they still have, in my opinion, I think is pretty objectively true at this point, they got to have a tackle, right? You got to go find a tackle in this draft. And the good news is they are very, very well positioned to do that at 7 and or at number 34 in this draft. I think that one 38. Of those 2 spots 38. I wrote it 38. I don't know where I got 34 from. At 38 or at number 7. I think it's pretty fair to assume one of those 2 picks at least will be a tackle. If it's not, then really I will never predict anything about the draft ever again, because I'm hesitant to even say this, but is it crazy to say at this point, JT, one of those has to be a tackle, right? It just has to.
Yeah. With how much talent there is, I think that you can't pass up on a tackle right now in the first round. Now, could there be a wild scenario where, as people start talking, and as the lies are being spread, Malik Neighbors is now wide receiver 1, and somehow you're sitting at 7 and Marvin Harrison Jr. is there on the board? That's almost feels like an opportunity that you can't pass down regardless of the cost. Right. But
till 38, then that's my point, though.
Exactly. And then in 38, it's gotta be one of them. You still think it is first round tackle because of the high end there, and just kind of feeling like you can plug and play to an extent. They're not going to be a Pro Bowl starter most likely in the first year, but that's something where you now have your answer. At 38, like you just said, I think it opens up a lot of possibilities because, as we talked about when we were at the combine, with so much good offensive talent this year in the draft, it's going to push some of that defensive value, whereas they could be viewed as a first round talent. Now they're falling into the second round, and you can really come away with a stud in the second round now that, we've really never been talking about the Titans looking at defense in the second round, but now I think that's an obvious target spot for the Titans to get some more defensive depth.
Right. And so now they can go through the draft freely. And that's the ultimate point here. I think it's the most important thing that they've done for themselves in free agency and in the offseason so far. They take in the draft who they feel is the best value at each pick. They don't have to spend nearly as much attention on the two letters in front of the player's name, whether it's OT or WR or CB. They can take the best guys at the premium positions wherever they see the best opportunities to do so in the draft, and nothing has to be forced. That is really important. It's well done. Free agency is for need. The draft is for value. And so I just want to do a little bit of a look back on the Titans' needs coming into this offseason, because to me, you had three that were flashing red on your dashboard. Your oil must be changed now. Hey, your engine is overheating. Hey, your tire pressure is 0. You're running on your wheels right now. You're running on rims. Like, they had three of those that were flashing red, alarms going off. Offensive line, I would say the most and probably double. Like, there were 2 lights going off for them. Wide receiver, cornerback, all 3 of those positions. And then you also had linebacker, defensive line, edge, safety, big long laundry list with a number of fires on your roster. Now headed into the draft just a month or so later, right? They've still got offensive line. I'd say it's go down to 1 light now. It's still an issue, but you've got the center shored up a little bit. You bring in Lloyd Cushenberry as the new quarterback of your offensive line, the brains of the operation, to anchor the center. You're going to build out from there. You still need 2 tackles, so that's the only flashing red light still, but it's not as bad as it once was. And then wide receiver and cornerback, not really there anymore as the biggest needs right now. Now, could they use a wide receiver? They're very old at that position. Could they use a young receiver? 100%. But it's more of a luxury now than a need in 2024 and 2025, right? What they need now is offensive line at the top, and then like defensive line, you really need another guy besides Jeffrey Simmons. Linebacker, you need at least one guy that can wear the green dot. Edge, you need at least one guy not named Harold Landry that can be a starting edge on the opposite side of him. Safety is up there. So you get to safety, wide receiver, kind of in that area right there. And so they have far less premium positions that are pressing needs for them. And that's a big, big deal. I think that's very good work in free agency. And just to look over what they did to fix that, how they went from that first list I read to you, the second list, here's just a recap of their offseason so far. You bring in backup quarterback Mason Rudolph, running back Tony Pollard, wide receiver Calvin Ridley, center Lloyd Cushenberry, defensive tackle Sebastian Joseph Day, linebacker Kenneth Murray, cornerback L'Jarius Sneed, and cornerback Chidobe Awuzie. I think it's well done. And if that ends up being the marquee haul for them in free agency, I give it a thumbs up.
I would too. I think, like Kenneth said, you're getting dangerously close to that
champion of the offseason.
That champion of the offseason if the national media would pay attention to the Titans. But there you go. That's right. How can you be the champions of the offseason if they don't even want to, talk about you? So there you go. Big brain. Win the offseason, but don't get the title, right? That's how you do that.
Right. And I'm playing around in my head with that's probably going to be a recurring topic for us, because I'm a very self-aware person, and I can't help but pay attention to these things when I feel like we're not being honest with ourselves as a community in the media or with fans. Like, there is an element, and I brought it up, with our show with Zach when they brought in Calvin Ridley, where I asked him a question of, hey, how is this any different from the guys that spend all the money and win all the offseason awards? Like, we make fun of those guys all the time, and for good reason. It has a very bad track record of working that way. What's different here? And that's something that I think we're going to dive into more and try to be honest with ourselves over the next coming days and weeks. And so look forward to diving into that some more. But it's a fair question, and it's something that I think you have to have looming in the back of your head right now. But right now, maybe you just say, screw it, man. Good vibes. You got good players in here. You got good football players. Who cares? You got the good football players, right? JT, what is L'Jarius Sneed for folks that are like a cornerback? Yay. What exactly, what define him? Is he just a random old cornerback? Is he he's very good? What makes him good? let's define what makes him good. Very, very physical player, aggressive, press corner, probably the most, if not one of the most aggressive physical press corners in the league. Last year, 12 PBUs, 2 interceptions, 2 touchdowns allowed. He has led all cornerbacks in the league in press coverage snaps since 2021. So obviously, this is just a continuation of what the Titans and new DC Denard Wilson want to do with their defense. They want to get up on some guys. You're not going to deal, I think, in Tennessee much longer with this 5 yards off coverage when it's 3rd and 3, and you're saying, how are you giving up the sticks here? Get on the man. They're not going to be terrified in that way anymore. They may get beat deep. They're going to get burned on occasion. That's what happens when you play press man. But it's a high risk, high reward situation. And so you could argue, well, press man, hey, you got Chidobe Awuzie, you got L'Jarius Sneed. Nobody's getting off the line of scrimmage. I think our buddy James said that this year. He's like, Rand's cooking. Nobody's getting off the line of scrimmage for the Titans this year. It's just going to be tackling dudes at the line. It's over. It's a wrap for the receivers the Titans face. Here's a look at L'Jarius Sneed's numbers last year against wide receiver ones. And he did a lot of shadowing with the Chiefs last year against Calvin Ridley, his new teammate, which, those two in training camp, it's going to be box office. Calvin Ridley and L'Jarius Sneed, Chidobe Awuzie and DeAndre Hopkins, Roger McCreary and Treylon Burks, dare I say, which we'll get to in just a second. He faced up against Calvin Ridley last year with the Chiefs, and Calvin went for 2 receptions and 32 yards against DJ Moore, 1 reception and 4 yards. Garrett Wilson, 3 receptions, 24 yards. Justin Jefferson, 2 receptions, 14 yards. Cortland Sutton, 1 reception, 23 yards. AJ Brown, 1 reception, 4 yards. Devontae Adams, 6 receptions, 66 yards. Stephon Diggs, 1 reception, 3 yards. Jamar Chase, 2 receptions, 27 yards. And notice there are no touchdowns listed on any of those guys. That's who you got as a Tennessee Titan now. That's who L'Jarius Sneed is, and that's a big, big deal. You compare him to the Titans' old cornerback one Mr. Christian Fulton, who's now a member of the Los Angeles Chargers. Some stark numbers, I'd say. Reception rate, roughly 20% lower. Passer rating allowed, roughly 70 points lower. 8 more PBUs. Just the success rate, roughly 17% better success rate. He has a negative EPA per target, whereas Christian Fulton had a very positive EPA per target. All the numbers, those charts where you compare 2 guys' numbers and the one that is the winner in that category is highlighted on one side and it goes back and forth. It's like L'Jarius Sneed's just it's a Sharpie highlighter all the way down on his side of the column there. So that is a very big deal. And I think the Titans secondary Titans defense as a whole is aware of that, because you had, once the signing came out, some rave reviews from Jeffrey Simmons saying that secondary, yes, loud, help me, help you. He can't, he's got to be the happiest man over all of this, right? Because of the years he has spent now getting after the quarterback in 2.7 seconds. But the quarterback got the ball out in 2.5 seconds. Why? Because the guy was wide open, because the secondary was tissue paper. I think he's looking forward to not having that be the issue anymore. And then on the back end, playing alongside him, Amani Hooker and Chidobe Awuzie, both very big fans. Now, I know that you brought up a good point here, JT, and I want you to share what you found on Chidobe Awuzie, who is now going to be able to move from, he's penciled in as that cornerback 1 of the Titans roster to now cornerback 2. And one hell of a cornerback 2 he will be on paper for the Titans. You went back and looked at how he's performed with the Bengals the past couple of years in different roles, and what did you find?
Yeah, I mean, so I think that's the biggest thing of coming back to that force multiplier kind of idea, having him now back in that cornerback 2 role. If you look back at the season where they went to the Super Bowl, you can look at who was playing around Chidobe Awuzie, who arguably was the best corner on that Super Bowl run for that team before he tore his ACL. You had guys like the resurgence of Eli Apple for one season. You had Jesse Bates around him. You had Von Bell. You still had Mike Hilton around him. The last dance
of Eli Apple. I forgot about that. Yeah.
A lot of those guys. You had a lot of talented guys around him where Chidobe Awuzie wasn't having to do everything. And you had a lot of other guys around him where he wasn't the one guy that you could uber target all the time. And you look at him the next year where you lose some of those pieces like Jesse Bates and no longer having Eli Apple as they got younger, obviously coming back from the ACL. I think that one you kind of put to a wash though, but 2021, 75.5 PFF grade, 2022, 69.9. And then you get to 2023, where last year you had Chidobe Awuzie as the number 1 corner. And then you started seeing this movement of youth into the Bengals system between DJ Turner and still having Mike Hilton, but DJ Turner, Cam Taylor-Britt, Jordan Battle, a lot of these younger guys who were around him, where Chidobe Awuzie was having to be that shutdown guy that he really isn't supposed to be all the time. That's where you see the numbers truly dip, where he had a 62.6 PFF grade. So I think with this addition here, with getting L'Jarius Sneed into the building, I think that puts Chidobe Awuzie back into that cornerback 2 role, where I think with Denard Wilson and Chris Harris and a lot of these guys, I think I'm pretty confident that he can get back to that 2021 number there, where he's not just the guy that you have to go up against every week. He now has a lot of players around him.
Well, in hindsight, being 2020, it makes me wonder, do you think this was an element in the minds of the Titans front office when they went and signed Chidobe Awuzie, saying, hey, we're not only going to bring in this guy who's talented, but we think we're going to get more out of him than he was last year with the Bengals, because we're going to have him be our cornerback too. We're targeting a guy to be playing over him, and ultimately that comes to fruition. And I'd imagine they're very happy about that.
And when your coach is Brian Callahan, who saw this firsthand between Chidobe Awuzie, and then also
he knows
seeing L'Jarius Sneed absolutely shut down your stud wide receiver Jamar Chase, you kind of can start to connect the dots there and see what they're planning in the secondary.
Let's talk about 2 other players before we get out of here, and their names are Roger McCreary and Treylon Burks, who I hinted at just a second ago. L'Jarius Sneed and Calvin Ridley being on this Titans team, it means that these 2 guys are free to move back into the inside full time. You can have Roger McCreary being your cornerback 3 in the slot, and you've got Treylon Burks you can use as a big slot, where he was at his best in college. Now, I tweeted this out, and I phrased it poorly, and I regretted phrasing it the way I did as soon as I put it out, because I'm like, this is technically not true. I messed in my head. I just got it twisted. Treylon Burks in college, yes, that's where he was pretty much exclusively. It's where he had his most success by a large margin. As a big slot, he was the operator in college that got it done, and that's what got him drafted ultimately. Now, the Titans get him, and he's a first-round pick, and he's a big-bodied guy, and he's got catch skills and a great catch radius and a very athletic player. You're thinking, oh, he's got good speed. We got to see what he's like on the outside, because he was an outside player. Man, that value is even higher. Let's try it out. And it hasn't worked at all, right? And so you'd think, okay, let's salvage this guy. Let's get him back to where we know we have a track record of him being a very good player. With Roger McCreary, in college, he was an outside guy, and I messed that up. I said that he was at his best in college this way. No, he's at his best as a prospect in this role, and then with the Titans so far, he has bore that out. And what I mean by that is he's a guy that played on the outside at Auburn, but he's got a shorter arms. He's just shorter in general, and that's something that lends itself more to the inside than the outside. You can see that burn you sometimes if you're an outside guy and you don't have the necessary length. That's where he was projected as a prospect. And then he comes into the Titans and he plays outside when necessary, and he's fine. But the shortcomings they rear their ugly head at times. When he's moved inside, man, like last year, he was able to play inside quite a bit, and he was awesome. He played 100% of the snaps, and he most games was a big plus for them. And so him being able to move on the inside full time with the other 2 guys in front of him is a massive deal. I think Roger McCreary, Chido Awuzie, and L'Jarius Sneed, easily the best threesome of Titans, best 3-pack of Titans cornerbacks that they've had. I mean, it's been a long time. The last time that there was this much hype was Logan Ryan and Adoree Jackson and those guys. I'm forgetting the third guy. When they brought in Christian Fulton, maybe I could be wrong. The point is, it's been at least 5 or 6 years now since they've been really this high on a group, and I think that these 3 are as even more talented than that group on paper. So it's very exciting to see them. And then Treylon Burks, man, I know that folks, we've said on this show, he's an icing guy. He's a gravy guy. He's a dessert guy. Like it's awesome if you get it. And as Sean says, is Chirk, is this new system? Chig and Burks. I just combined in my mouth. Burks and Chig, are they going to be booming in this new system? I think that you've got the best chance for Treylon Burks to really set himself apart and live up to some of his draft capital in this, his draft pedigree in this group that you've ever seen. One, because he's got easily the best 2 guys in front of him that he's had so far. He's expected to be the wide receiver 3. And number 2, because Malcolm Butler. Thank you, Kenneth. I was like, I know who Malcolm Butler. Yeah, 100%. Traylon Burks, he's a talented guy, and you go back and look at his pedigree as a college player from the slot, where a lot of, I think, sharp analysts were saying you need to play him that way in the NFL. You can't give in to the temptation to move him outside, and the Titans ultimately did. That's the best, and I think probably last path he has to redemption in terms of a first overall wide receiver. Could he have a phenomenal breakout season in the slot? Theoretically, yes, he could. Am I banking on it? No, and I wouldn't recommend you do. But the idea of it happening and getting to see once and for all him in the role that I think he is best utilized in, that's a really exciting thought to me.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think it opens up a lot more opportunities for him to play a little bit like a Tyler. It's so hard to not see all of these comparisons to what they were doing in Cincinnati with Brian Callahan and not try to bring that over right now with what they're doing with Treylon Burks.
He may
but
well be the Tyler Boyd of this group, which is
it really feels like he could shoe in nicely to that Tyler Boyd role there. And I think that's something that we're going to talk about all offseason.
Yep. All right. As for talking, I think we're done for today. JT, we appreciate everybody tuning in with us live. If you are listening post, we do it live, so check it out. We are going to be doing 3 shows a week from now until the draft, at least. Again, we'll probably be doing more than that as we get closer and try to cram in shows at the last minute. But for the foreseeable future, check us out on Sunday afternoons live, on Tuesday afternoons live, and on Thursday afternoons live each and every week, diving into the last bit of Titans free agency and heavy into draft content. We've got mock draft 1.0 was supposed to be today, but then of course, this happened. So we're pushing that back to, I believe, Tuesday. On Thursday, look for a special guest to join us. I'm not sure who yet, but I know, JT, you're going to be traveling on that day. So I'm going to have somebody join me.
Unless I'll be doing the show from
the air,
10,000 feet in that'll
That'll be good. I think
that'd be good.
Airplanes
content.
are notorious for their high quality internet services. So that should go well. We'll have 3 shows this week, 2 after today. So check those out. Make sure you're watching all the other shows on the 440 podcast network. We've got a football show on Mondays and Fridays. Mondays and Thursdays. We've got the guys over at the Music's the Audible, Justin are doing content all the time throughout the week. The Paul Kuharski show, the soccer shows, the hockey shows. We've got everything here in town. There's even some local political content on the stream now. So check out all the things that we're doing here on the 440 Podcast Network. It's good stuff, and give the other shows some love. Until Tuesday afternoon when we are live again for our Wednesday taping. Gosh darn it, I'm bad at this. Tuesday for our Wednesday taping. I'm Easton Freeze for producer JT. We'll talk to you.